I'm sure there might be one or two stragglers coming in the room, but we'll ignore them. Croeso, welcome. Um, this is the second Paul Higgins Legacy Lecture featuring visionary CEO and games creator Susan Cummings and our very own Ellie Griffin, who will be doing the Q&A later. Thank you all for joining us this evening. It is fantastic to see you all here. Thank you. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Gavin Johnson, the producer, one of the producers from Media Cymru, the Centre for Creative Economy unit from Cardiff University. This is the second event in the Paul Higgins lecture series, and for those that didn't know Paul, I just want to reiterate how important he was. Paul was a visionary entrepreneur, innovator, and investor in the film and television sector. He was also a champion of the sector and a supporter of those building their businesses here in Wales. He was integral to the creation of Media Cymru and was a true champion of its vision and ambition. Media Cymru, for those of you new to us, we aim to really turn Cardiff capital region into a global hub for media innovation. We're a 22-partner, £54 million collaboration, and we work with the media and screen businesses and freelancers to realise their innovation dreams. So we put together the bid for Media Cymru during lockdown over hundreds of Zoom calls, and without overstating it, Paul was a massive part of that process and really kind of drove that innovation initiative forward and helped kind of us dream and dream big. So we helped to shape our ambitions in areas such as virtual productions, new innovations, and business development, which was always a keen eye on a kind of upskilling and inclusion. So Media Cymru, it's taken on Paul's ambition and drive to be better, bolder, and bigger. And since our inception, along with the consortium partners, we've achieved some notable landmarks. So firstly, through our innovation pipeline, we set up Innovators for Creatives as a launch pad for creatives to begin their R&D journey. So Media Cymru, in collaboration with PDR and Alacrity, set out a 5-day innovation creatives course, and that course supports over 20 participants, or has supported over 20 participants, and each course supports 20 participants who are thinking about developing their first R&D proposal. And this gives creatives an opportunity to explore the idea of entrepreneurship, concepts of innovative user-centered design, and commercializations at the forefront. So any of you interested or keen to kind of explore your next steps after university, or you're already in the sector, I would really encourage you to scan the QR code, find out a little bit more information as that is currently open. Next, we recently launched a brand new Cymru Broadcast Centre facility that's been designed to be one of the most accessible remote production hubs in Europe, streaming live coverage from Cardiff around the globe during the Paralympics. And along with Channel 4, Media Cymru co-funded research and development around accessibility and live production in conjunction with the Ability People, with the hope of acting as a case study for other technical facilities to use as best practice and share learnings. It's in the top right there. Having these accessible remote production facilities will not only open opportunities for disabled people in Wales and beyond, but provide a perfect example of what can be done with the commitment and investment of research and development. So funding and support through our innovation pipeline. This autumn alone, we've made over 1.2 million of funding available to the sector. And there's some calls that currently have just closed, but calls are also ongoing, and some more will open soon. And Media Cymru has now funded over 79 projects to date, and there's many more on the horizon, so please keep an eye out for those. And perhaps one of the most notable developments of recent times, over the summer mainly, taken on from Paul's kind of vision, is the opening of the Advanced Production Facility Fivefold Studios, which is the two bottom pictures, the big green screens. with this studio space headquartered in Wales, which is a world-leading virtual production facility. The space also has offices and 12,000 square feet of studio space for people to use and utilize. It really is kind of bringing virtual production to the heart of Wales and the creative sector, and really does elevate Wales' national TV and film sector and the infrastructure here. So as well as ensuring that Media Cymru truly makes a difference to the sector here, we also wanted to mark Paul's contribution both to Media Cymru and to the industry here in South Wales, where he worked for more than 40 years. This lecture series aims to highlight the impact of Paul and how that impact will continue long into the future. So I really do encourage you to make the most out of tonight's talk and the people around you, make connections, get networking, talk to each other, so we can continue to build on Paul's legacy. And now we move on to the main event. Our keynote speaker for this evening, as a pioneering leader in gaming technology and someone who has a connection to Paul, someone who has consistently pushed boundaries, leading early adoption in mobile gaming, AR, VR, explored the vast potential of digital ownership and interoperability with Petaverse, and now embarking on a new vision through 10.6. Her work is shaping the future of digital pets and expanding the possibilities of generative AI. So, without further ado, Susan Cummings.
Wales has been my second home now for 26 years. I was in San Francisco during the first dot-com boom back in the late 90s after I got out of university. And my husband, who went to Basleg, who was a Land Rumney boy, was on holiday. And we met and fell in love and got married 5 months later back in the late 90s. And we've worked together ever since now for 26 years. So we spent a long part of our journey together at Take-Two Interactive, which is Rockstar Games and 2K Games, and so he was a producer there on some of the Grand Theft Auto titles, which apparently has become a local legend at Basleg, that someone Basleg worked on GTA. Did. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of the setup of 2K Games and 2K Sports when I was at Take-Two. So we worked there for many years before setting off on our own 15 years ago, setting up Tiny Rebel Games, which we've had for many years and has changed form many times, and ultimately led to us moving over here 8 years ago. And I met Paul before we moved over. We were in Los Angeles, and we had just done a successful Doctor Who mobile game, Doctor Who Legacy, and Creative Wales. I think Catherine's here somewhere. We started talking through Paul about the media investment budget and what we were doing. And it was interesting. We were looking to do a follow-on to the game, and we were trying to figure out how we could do something with local Welsh talent. And it turned out there is a massive, I don't know if everyone knows this, comic book community within Wales, writers and artists, both in North Wales and down here. And they all know each other, and we got to know people like Mike Collins and Dylan Teague and others really well, and worked with them together on a follow-up project that felt like a living comic book. And Paul was just a big resource and motivator and helper to getting that off the ground, getting our business off the ground over here 8 years ago when we moved our business over. And while that was a small project, you know, it really was what led us on a long journey over the last 8 years, from a little company that was really meant to just be Lee and I, to our involvement in AR, thanks to the support from Creative Wales, who kind of kicked us in the ass to apply for an Innovate grant. And that work led to us building Petaverse and raising $7 million from global investors, and even into the work I'm doing now with a small group of those folks on the cutting edge of generative AI. So I really have, I was so sad when I found out about Paul's passing. He really was a wonderful friend to the company and to us when we set up over here. So yeah, do you want to? So I'm very lazy, said we should do this as a fireside chat.
Well, huge thanks for that quick introduction for us.
Sure.
Before I start off with any questions, I just want to introduce myself. So my name's Ellie. I work for Media Cymru, but I'm also an avid gamer myself. In fact, some of my first memories are spent playing the original Tomb Raider games with my dad as a toddler. I was in charge of the space bar, so we really made it work. We did make it work. So I'm really happy to be here today, so thank you so much. So lots of the audience here tonight would like to pursue a career in gaming. You've worked for some massive names, we'll talk a bit more about that later, throughout your career, but you've also started a variety of smaller, more indie studios. What are the pros and cons of working for both, and which would you recommend for sort of a graduate looking to get their first step in through the door?
You know, it's a difficult time. I'm sure anyone here who's looking to get into games knows that. It's a very challenging time. I don't think there's ever been such a challenging time. It's very cyclical, but in my 30 years or so in games, I've never seen it quite as difficult as this. There have been a lot of layoffs over the course of the last 12 months. I think we're starting to see the other side of that. Normally, in any normal time, my advice would be to join a larger company and learn. It kind of depends on what motivates and inspires you. I'm always inclined to say you should learn the industry. I remember when I met Lee 30 years ago saying to him, everyone's got a video game idea. It's like film. Everyone's got a film idea. Unless you actually know what you're doing, it's a dime a dozen. There's a lot more than just an idea. And so I think there's value in starting out, getting involved in QA, for example, is the usual obvious in route at a company. But that said, in the times that we're in now, what's interesting is there's two ends of the spectrum right now, and I've seen this happen before, where on the one end, AAA, Grand Theft Auto level budgets, which means hundreds of millions of dollars and equal amounts in marketing, or you're at the other end of the spectrum. And if you look at what's working on Steam, for example, you'll see a lot of very indie games that were made by one person, two people, a few people, and those can work. They don't work to the same extent. They don't make the money that Grand Theft Auto makes, but if you look at how much it costs to make it, the returns can be really good. It's very crowded, but I think that there's a lot of opportunity right now on that indie end, and I think that the sort of garage vibe of like the 80s is back there in terms of like grab what you need and muck in together, which is really, Lee and I are visiting professors here at USW. We have been almost since we moved over. And I've said this over and over again at the universities here. If you want to make games, make games. And surround yourself with what you need. You're not going to be able to do everything, unless you're the Stardew Valley guy. He did everything. But if you're a programmer, find a great artist, find a designer, find your people that you're going to potentially work with for the rest of your career. I've worked with the same people over and over and over again. They become your team. And now's a great time to find those people and to iterate. There's so many tools out there that democratize making video games, that if you're willing to do something on a shoestring, there's an opportunity there.
Thank you. I guess, so I know a bit about your involvement with Grand Theft Auto, sort of the origins, but I don't think the audience will. So, and I thought it was a really exciting story. So would you mind telling us a bit about your involvement with the original?
Yeah, it's a fun story. So I was in San Francisco at the time. This was right around the time I met Lee. And I had been a recruiter. So I had a weird journey into the video game industry. I graduated from Brandeis, and I got a job as a headhunter recruiter. And I went to work for a really good search firm who threw a book of multimedia, handed a book of multimedia companies to me and said, you should specialize in that. Because that was a thing in the mid-90s, multimedia. And they were mostly game companies. And so I started talking to game companies who were all really cool people. And that's how I got involved. And I moved from recruiting to doing publishing deals. And I was working with Bertelsmann, BMG Interactive, Bertelsmann, the German media company. They had a games group. People might not remember or be too young to remember. And the British part of that, Sam Hauser and Gary Dale and others were doing Grand Theft Auto with DMA. And so I was hired on by BMG to sell off the rights to Grand Theft Auto, amongst other things. I remember the first time I saw it, it was at the European Computer Trade Show in 1997, I want to say. And no one knew about the game yet, and I was meant to sell off the publishing rights. And it turned out BMG was also looking at selling the business full stop to a company called American Softworks that you definitely have never heard of. And I got to know Ryan Brandt, who was running Take-Two at the time. Ryan was young. We were both young at the time. We were in our 20s. and Take-Two was a nothing company that was doing a lot of FMV games. And Ryan was one of the best, Ryan passed away, unfortunately, was one of the best deal people I ever worked with. And he encouraged me, he wanted to talk to them to see if he could convince them to sell. Not even because of Grand Theft Auto, I might add. It was because they were doing some Nintendo games he was interested in. Anyway, very long story short, he convinced them and bought BMG Interactive. That became Rockstar Games, and they did some really unfortunate games like Surfing H3O, if anyone remembers. But they eventually got it right and put out Grand Theft Auto 3, and the rest was history. We joined Rockstar about 6 months after GTA 3 came out, right after September 11th, and stayed with it ever since. But things could have gone very, very differently had I not been that route.
Well, over the course of your career, how have you seen the gaming industry evolve? What's your best advice for staying ahead of that curve? And what trends do you think we're going to see in the next 5 years?
Ooh, that's a big question. Video games are a wonderful proving ground for new technologies. The stakes are lower. It's entertainment, and so if you don't get it right, it's kind of funny. AI, is what I'm getting to eventually. But video games are always an adopter of early technologies. So I've seen many of those transitions over my career. Both the console transitions. When I got involved, it was PlayStation 1. So I watched the evolution through the Xbox coming out and the Nintendo evolution, and then mobile. And more recently, it's been things like augmented reality and virtual reality, Web3, and AI now, most recently. And there's a lot of hype. There's always a lot of hype with these new technologies. There's companies that are in the new technologies that think the gaming part is an afterthought. That's fine, we'll just make Mario. Well, you just make Mario. And so I think it's important to separate hype from what's real. And ultimately, if it's not a good game, it's going to be gimmick. And so whatever the new technology is, whether it's blockchain, whether it's virtual reality, whether it's using generative AI, start with a great game. Start with a great concept that if you stripped all that away, there'd still be something special there. And then figure out how you make it better with that new technology. And so I don't mean to doomsday naysay on technology. I think that's been one of our driving forces with Tiny Rebel, has been early adoption. We were early on mobile, and we were early on those other technologies as well. But always in terms of trying to find the real meaningful use cases that weren't just chasing the fad. So that would be I think the biggest thing I would say is make sure that the fads go away too. So make sure that what you have can handle that as well, that you can pivot away from the new technology that suddenly no one's excited about anymore.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned generative AI, because that's what the next question is about. So a lot of your more recent work revolves around generative AI, which is the creation of new content using artificial intelligence. In the creative sphere specifically, where there are already funding and contracting challenges and still many unknowns around the use of AI, how do we ensure that Gen AI and its use is ethical, and also help people understand the opportunities it presents as much as the perceived threats?
So, getting involved it's almost like I'm a masochist. I got involved in Web3 and games early and had to apologize to a lot of people or try to frame why we were doing it and what the holistic use case was and why we were different. And now here we are again with generative AI. So it does make me nervous. The difference is generative AI is not going away. Doesn't matter what we want to say about it, how we feel about it, it's not going away. It happened, in my mind, almost overnight. We were fortunate enough to get early access to DALL-E when it was in beta. And no one had heard about it then that much. I kind of vaguely knew who OpenAI was. This is like a blink of an eye ago, right? And we started playing with it, and then they opened it up, and then suddenly everybody and their mother was playing with prompts and so forth. So it's ridiculous how quickly that has become a part of the fabric of our world. So it's not going away. But I do think that we have the opportunity right now to lay the groundwork of how these things should work, of how to protect each other. And there's some really wonderful use cases. Within In Tiny Rebel, we frequently used it as a way to explain to our concept artists what we wanted without using stick figures. It was a way of getting almost there and then saying, this is kind of what we have, almost like storyboarding. This is what we have in mind. Now can you make that better? And so that was really useful. Our whole art team actually found it really useful to just iterating quickly on ideas. So there are definitely wonderful use cases there. Beyond that, with the work that I'm doing now, we're trying to look at how we protect artist rights. So think about audio artists, for example, in like the film business or TV. When you use someone's voice, typically there are buyouts related to it if you want to use it somewhere else. It's for use in a specific project. With AI, that's kind of all over the place. So we're trying to look at ways in which we can sort of define how those relationships would work. So I think that that's part of it. It's being thoughtful about it and talking about these things as opposed to trying to hide them away. I think as students, those of you who are students, it's really important to learn these tools. My son is 16 and an engineer, and I'm pushing him to understand these tools because they are going to be a part of our lives, and it means that you need to future-proof your career, and you need to think about if the world does adopt this, as it clearly is going to, where do I fit into that? What's the piece that I can contribute into that? As opposed to, sticking your fingers in your ears and saying, no, but I want to do it this way. But the world's moving that way. And so the sensible thing is to figure out where you can contribute and make things better, as opposed to trying to hold that back. But it's scary. I get why it's scary. I completely get why it's scary to folks, especially to artists. But I think it's like anything else, it's about having ethical companies that take care of their team.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you've worked with some huge household names over the years, as well as some massive IPs. So Wallace and Gromit, Doctor Who. Would you mind talking a bit about those deals? And then also maybe talk about the challenges and the positives of working with these big names, and some advice on holding your own when you're put into trying situations.
Sure. Look, IP is challenging. Licenses, I guess I mean to say. When I was at Take-Two, we were very focused on original IP. And then we started focusing a little bit more on licenses. And we worked with Paramount, my partner and I. We ran the games group at Paramount. So we got to work on Star Trek. And we got to work on one of my favorite games of all time that I've ever worked on. Was based on War of the Worlds. Paramount had no money, really, for games. And we convinced them that we were going to make a brand new War of the Worlds game because my husband always wanted to make one. And this was really just a love letter to that story. And we convinced Patrick Stewart to narrate the whole thing. You'll have a hard time finding this, by the way, but I think there's a YouTube video that you can watch it. Patrick Stewart narrates the entire thing. He's the only voice in it. And he did it for 20 grand. It's a great story. I spoke to his agent, and his agent said, there's no way he's going to do that. And I said, that's all we have as a budget. And he called me back the next day, and he said, so Patrick told me that he used to run around as a kid quoting the movie, and he said he would do it for free even. So we had Christopher Fowler, who's since passed away, who's a British horror and mystery writer, write a brand new story about War of the Worlds that took place right after World War II. So there was this wondering of, are the Germans back or what's happening? And anyway, it becomes a homage to games like Flashback and Out of This World, or Limbo, for example, which was at that time. And he's just trying to get across London. And it was a magical project. We had Chris Hulsbeck, who's a well-known audio designer in the game industry, recorded an original composition with the Macedonian Orchestra for us. So if you can find it, it was an XBLA game that we did. That was tremendous. Aardman were amazing to work with, and they've become dear lifelong friends of ours on the back of it. Creative Wales, Catherine and Paul, encouraged us to bid for an Innovate grant after the Doctor Who project. And there was, some of you may know, there was an Audience of the Future program, which is a wonderful thing, by the way. I don't want to say as an American, I'm now British as well, but as an American coming over, the idea that the government was putting funding into creative projects, including the stuff that Media Cymru is doing, is just extraordinary to me. And they put £40 million aside for creative projects, and 4 of these were demonstrators, and one of them that we won was the moving image demonstrator. And probably the biggest message I want to say here is that when I moved across to Wales, I found there was an attitude of it's never going to happen. don't bother bidding for these things. We've always ended up getting them in the end, which is more just dogged determination than it is talent. And so I would encourage you to like drown that out, go for it. And so that's what happened. We said we don't have any AR experience, but we think it's cool. And so we bid. We put a bid together, and we beat out a couple hundred projects, including some Hollywood projects. And it was meant to be a Doctor Who project. I've never really talked about this much publicly, but on the back of the work on Doctor Who, we were going to do this as a Doctor Who live city-scale AR project, which would have been great. The BBC ended up backing out. And so here's a bit of a story of resilience, is we won. We were down to the wire. There were 10 projects. 2 of them were Doctor Who projects. They weren't very happy when we won, though we did have the rights. In any case, not to dwell on that, we had to be resilient. It was a very bleak Christmas where we'd won this multi-million-pound grant and didn't have an IP. And Innovate said to us, you know what, we have your back. Go find another IP and it'll be fine. And so we set up, this was a great opportunity, right? We had £4 million to spend on AR, so everyone was excited about it. We talked to Terry Pratchett's estate. We talked to the fellow who runs Terry Pratchett's estate. We talked to the Agatha Christie estate. We were talking with Netflix. We were talking with Lego. It was really exciting, actually. But Aardman were the first ones we spoke to. And they got so excited, like the first meeting, they just wanted to roll up their sleeves and be a part of this with us. And so, so that's what we ended up doing. And we created Wallace and Gromit, the big fix-up, and Fix Up the City during COVID. We brought together 4 teams and University of South Wales and Aardman to create a storytelling experiment where you could go on a journey with Wallace and Gromit and fix up the city of Bristol. And it was about this new character named Grub, who of course had ill intentions towards Wallace. And it was really magical. And then we also, if any of you saw it, we did this city scale in Bristol and in Cardiff and in San Francisco. And it was really, really an epic AR experience. So we had a brilliant time working on that.
I remember that actually, and I didn't know it was you, so it's
It was stuff that I don't think anyone realized was possible. We had a 40-foot robot smash his way, so to speak, out of the Wales Millennium Center, and kicking robots down the street. Like, it was really, really, it was cool. It was a lot of fun. We learned a lot from it, and it, once again, was something that was really pivotal to us as a company in terms of putting ourselves on the map as, you know, bleeding edge technologists. Led to a lot of great things from there.
A combination of resilience, but also the big names sort of playing along with you, basically. I like that. That's great. Well, in 2023, the UK's video game industry was worth £7.82 billion, a 4.4% increase from 2022, making it the largest and most resilient video game sector in Europe. In order for us to keep seeing this growth, what sort of policy decisions or investment do we need from our political leaders and stakeholders to continue to support the sector, would you say?
It needs help right now. You know, it's a very difficult time. I think that the British government has been tremendous with things, like I said, like Innovate, UKRI, about grant initiatives that allow for these the sort of stuff that VCs won't fund because it's too early and experimental. So definitely we need more of that. So I'm hoping that that's going to become a big part of Labour's plans over the course of the coming years. I have no doubt that it will. I think that there's sort of 2 ends of the investment community that are kind of still available right now and coming back. The early money and the late stage money to grow. What's really missing is in the middle, is we have an idea, we've built it out, but we're not to metrics yet. We don't have enough users yet to meaningfully know how much it's going to cost to get more users and if they're going to stick around. So that's an area that not enough is happening with. A bunch of money has poured in through British Bank and PwC, but it's all once you've shown traction. And that's not really where the problem is. There's VC money for that. So that's really important. I think that initiatives to get people angel investing, there's more and more of this happening, but there needs to be even more. And within Wales itself, it's been challenging because most of the angel community within Wales understand things like semiconductors and fintech and things like that, but they don't understand, creative. It's been a hold up for DevBank as well to get that kind of knowledge. I think everyone's trying, and we've certainly been trying to help that along. I think that what Sarah and everyone are doing with Media Cymru and the grants that Cardiff and USW, that's all wonderful. I think Creative Wales is a wonderful source as well. They've had a load of different initiatives within the Welsh budget to fund products. And so I think that UK tries a lot more than many other countries do. I think that the tax credit system is great. The VGTR tax credits are tremendous. And so part of it is you really just have to take the initiative to find this stuff. Disseminating that, it'd be great if it was easier for people to know exactly where to turn to find these things, because not everyone knows where to look.
Yeah. The funding is there, you just got to find it.
It's not necessarily, I don't want to sound easy. Like, it's way, way harder than it was a few years ago. But there are opportunities, but you have to do some legwork to find them.
You do talk about that, the speed at which it's not so fast anymore. Or is it that it's quicker now with the deals, right? That slower now, faster before. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. The effort required to raise a small percentage of what you could have done a few years ago, much harder. Everyone is the economy is very difficult, challenging globally. Well, I mean, really, the biggest thing that happened, in my opinion anyway, is the pandemic. The pandemic made everything go through the roof. Everyone was stuck at home, so we were all playing games, we were all watching movies, and so you got big public companies, film companies, game companies, who said, look, we're going to keep going like that. And they weren't going to keep going like that. Anyone logically would look at it and say, obviously, that's a bubble, and that's going to burst. So, and then it did. And VCs poured money into the video game industry and have yet to see returns on a lot of it. And so all these things compounding together, and recession, economy, have just made it very, very difficult. I think to some extent, I think public companies found it as a way to clear house and save face whilst they were doing so, because everybody else was laying off, so we're going to start trimming as well. And that just escalates. And then people say, well, why aren't you laying people off? Or why aren't you cutting your costs? And it just explodes from there. There are too many games. There are thousands and thousands of games coming out every month. So no doubt there are too many games. But the industry will recover. I mean, that's the most important thing to remember. As bleak as it might feel, it will recover. The video game business is not going away. We all love to be entertained. We all play video games. For the first time, you can say that full stop. No matter who you are, if you have a phone, I guarantee you've got something on there, even if it's Wordle or Candy Crush. So the game industry isn't going away, but we need to look for ways, for example, to expand to new audiences. Kids are playing the big three: Roblox, Fortnite, and Minecraft. And whatever you do is probably just a distraction for them from those three games that they're going to go back to. So you either have to find a way to make that distraction really compelling for a while and make a bunch of money really quickly, or you have to find a way to get to a broader audience, the folks that aren't playing those things, an older audience, for example, the female audience that's been largely underserved. Like, look for ways to grow and expand.
Definitely. Well, Wallace and Gromit, Borderlands, GTA, BioShock, Doctor Who mobile games, we name it, you've made it. So my question is, out of all the games that you've published and promoted and worked on, what was your favorite to work on? And then maybe what is your favorite to play?
Ooh. Gosh. I would definitely say, going back to War of the Worlds, that's always the one that sticks out in my mind. I was involved in a lot of games. I would never want to be the one to say that I'm the person behind any of these things. Frequently, I was the person at the right place at the right time, or I was the person willing to take a risk. When we set up 2K Games, one of the deals we did was for Civilization. And Take-Two was a small company at the time compared to Electronic Arts, for example. We had an interesting week where at the start of on a Friday, we found out that Civilization was up for sale because Atari was struggling. By the following Friday, we handed them a $20 million check, and I got them to throw in XCOM as a freebie. The reason we got that deal is because everyone else was doing due diligence for months. The lawyers were literally in there doing due diligence while we bought it out from under them. And so the point of that story is that sometimes it's good to be scrappy. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts. Almost everything we did then was trusting our instincts, including BioShock. Nobody would sign BioShock. I was literally the only person willing to sign BioShock. And I had no doubt in my mind that it was going to work. I knew that Ken had been waiting for years to make the next System Shock. I loved being involved with BioShock. I mean, that was very much Ken, not me. But I loved working on it. And I love the fact that we allowed that game, to come into existence. So I do remember when it was announced in Game Informer, those of you who know BioShock, the little sisters, and that you were going to have the option to kill them or to save them. And that was news to all of us at 2K at the time. We didn't know that. That was interesting from a PR standpoint. So I would say BioShock certainly holds a special place in my heart because it's sort of one of the better things that I've been involved with. War of the Worlds, I would say, just in terms of feeling like a filmmaker, it was really, really special. Everything's been special for different reasons. I love doing Doctor Who Legacy. We had 3 million people play Doctor Who Legacy. Lee and I worked with a team in Asia to make this thing. We had no marketing money, and we would go to Doctor Who conventions and sci-fi conventions, and I've made lifelong friends in the Doctor Who community on the back of it. We had a blast working on that. It was a pity we had to end that.
Well, I'm really happy with that answer because I love BioShock. So, well, thanks for sharing so openly with us tonight and honestly. I just have one final question, and that's why Wales? What is special about Wales to you as a place to live and work? Why did you choose here?
Oh, that's a great question. When Lee and I met 26 years ago, was the first time I came across, and I think we came at least once or twice a year, every year, and it's always felt like a second home to me. I have a small family, so the Cummings family, are involved in everything from Tiny Rebel Brewery to lighting companies and everything else here. So I immediately felt a part of a community here. And when we moved the business here, it was really exciting to feel like we were in a place where we could make a difference. I spent my career in New York City, in San Francisco, and in Los Angeles, where we were one of many, many companies there. We were small fish in a very big pond. And here, where the industry has been a lot more nascent, we've just seen wonderful opportunities to really work closely with government, to work closely with universities, to work closely with students. And I've hired students, out of the universities here. So I think I really enjoy that. It's been very special to me. I got my citizenship 2 months ago, so in Newport, which was wonderful. I got my pen to prove it, my Newport pen. So I love it here. I'm only regretting I didn't try to do it in Welsh. I haven't learned the language yet, but.
Well, thank you so much for that, Susan. That was great. I found that really interesting. Before we sort of wrap up this bit and move out into the foyer for some drinks and some networking, I've just got some massive thanks to say first. So first off, huge thanks to Susan. Huge thanks to Gavin. And of course, to the Higgins family for your continued support and contributions to this event. A big thanks to the team at USW for letting them use our space, and to the student ambassadors who are filming this tonight. And as always, the Media Cymru team who helped with everything. So yeah, please stay and chat with us out in the foyer. There'll be a chance for some questions from Susan then. And thank you so much for coming.